So the artist, ta-da, I guess it's a journey into pūrākau, or kind of deep old stories and their recapitulations from Te Wai Pounamu and the various iwi who've been there and moved through there and have been mana whenua over time. And it's also, as well as being that non-fiction aspect, there's kind of like a fictional kind of narrative that threads all those different stories and events together. Yeah, I guess that's the basis of it. I had a really clear image in my head of one of the, I'll see if I can find a picture of her, one of the main characters walking down Te Haikiki, which is that one there, walking down the road where my marae is, which is called Māori Road, funnily enough, but just this really clear image in my head of her and the pā that was there as people at the marae have described it, because it went from being a settlement and being a pā into being kind of a potato farm after that, and then going back to going to paddocks and the marae that's there now, which was a Māori hall initially. So yeah, I had this image of her on that road, and her kind of controlling the elements in some way, controlling the winds, which were an important part of kind of wāhinitanga or wāhinitaka in southern Pūrākau. Like if we have women atua who control the winds within the original stories of how the South began. So yeah, I had that image of her, and then I kind of just let myself be in that world a bit more and did a lot of research around it as well to kind of flesh it out. But yeah, she was what came first, and then it was built around her. Where did I go and where did I look? It was kind of a variety of places. I read a lot of first-hand accounts about the South, like a lot of Alst and Best kind of materials and older materials, and also read materials like Tikau, like Tioni Tikau's book and his writings, and also looked at kōrero from our elders, from our kaumātua that have been documented, and also kind of listening to those conversations that we've had around the marae, that we've had around our Kaitahu people and our Waitaha people and Kati Mamoe people about, all these different phenomenon. And I think a lot of the research as well was kind of done before I started, because it's just things that we talk about all the time, and bringing those things in, like conversations I've had with cousins about cave art, or about people, about pigment. So it was kind of bringing in a whole range of those different things and using a range of different sources to kind of recreate the world or create the world within something real. Yeah. I totally can. So I make a lot of cards for figuring things out and creative processes, and like pairing people together and seeing what different relationships would look like, things like that. So I also wanted to kind of picture how they'd look and try another sense of showing who they were. So initially these were just for me, but then we kind of decided that they'd go into the book as these spreads that show within each section what the characters are doing and how the relationships are going, and using things that you'd find in a typical tarot spread, in terms of like if something's upside down, like that means the meaning's going to be a bit skewed and a bit different, possibly the reverse. So I've got a few characters. So Machu and Hana are kind of the second generation characters in the book, and are the parents of Te Haikiki, who I talked about before. So they've got their little facing each other. Then they have twins who are kind of the third generation within the book. So that's Te Haikiki and Rere Mai, who are there featuring as their children. So being able to show the different generations and spreads was really, really good. And then we've got a few other characters as well, like the artist and Hini Pounamu, who kind of bring in that Pūrākau element and interact with the twins as well, as they kind of grow up and get interested in other people and partners and all those things. Okamia, who's the youngest character in the book, but also probably the most ancient and wise in a way too. And Hinipunui, which is a tribute to one of my great, possibly another great grandmothers, and also, kind of a personal kaitiaki for me, and a reference too to those wind atua at the beginning of the world. So this one being Hinipunui or Toka. So her name and her as a concept and as a person features throughout the whole kind of book. And then, we've got another one is just a character from the pā, George Ihupuni. And so it gives kind of a visual to what those people are like, and helped me to kind of map things out as I went along. Yeah, definitely. I definitely try out doing different spreads and combinations. I learnt how to do, I'm not learnt how to do, but I focused a lot on making cave style art and things like that. Ugh, I've just actually got all these right here conveniently, but not planned. So I learnt how to do that with kokowai, which is the red pigment, and with pukipoto as well, which is the blue pigment, being from Rakinui's sinews. So I was kind of learning how to do that by making lots of small works, and the best way to do that in a way that they could all be used was to make cards. And so this one, for example, is like a red kokowai circle that shows the kind of beginning of the Kaitahu world, when the world was said to be, circular and flat and like a soup plate, and all the atua doing things around it. But it can also show that something's full and whole. Lots of things they can show. So I'd use those cards as well to try kind of figure out symbolism and where things may go. So there was an element of kind of using those devices. And we have evidence as well of Māori doing things like that and using something called niu, like NIU, to predict different things with like sticks and how they fall, or like light moon rays and how they fall, is something we've talked about before in a Tararua song actually. But so we have kind of evidence of using those things to figure it out. But I think most importantly, you're always going to do what you were always going to do. It just gives you the time to figure it out. It's like when you throw a coin to pick heads or tails, you already know which one you want it to be. It's giving you the opportunity to figure that out. Definitely. I'm very mythology obsessed. I always have been. And as a kid, I was really interested in Greek mythology, and I think that says a lot about accessibility in terms of what was available, because there were kind of amazing books on Greek myth when I was a kid that had beautiful illustrations, or kind of things you could take out, and same with for mythologies from other places, but not so much for Aotearoa. There was kind of a few Maui mostly based stories that were quite pan-tribal. So wanting to create like a beautiful resource that has those kind of pūrako in rather than myths, I guess, was something I really wanted to create, because I didn't have it, and I'm always kind of thinking about what resources I didn't have and the difference they could have made, and if I can make that difference elsewhere. But also because I think that there's so much of our identity that we find within myth and within pūrako. And so this was a way to kind of weave those together to show how a lot of kind of modern issues, or issues that we might not have with ourselves but that other people might have with us, we can strengthen our identity through the use of myths that we already have, through pūrako we already know. Yeah, definitely. I think that when we look, for example, at Māori health kind of models like Te Whare Tapawhā, we often ignore the kind of wairua element of it. So I really like bringing that into poetry and into story. So I did that a lot through my first book, looking at the relationship I have with my dad and how that whakapapa can move kind of within time, within other ancestors that we have, where we've been the same person within time. So that was definitely within there, and also that kind of that a sense of leaning into the kind of wairuatanga that can be within some dreams, and leaning into those conversations you have that really affirm those things, because I think that a lot of Māori will have those experiences but not have them affirmed, so have a kind of fear around it. So I kind of wanted to show that yes, there are some dangers, but there's a lot to be gained. There's a lot to be gained from being in that in between space, and from learning how to work with it. Yeah, definitely. So I did a decent amount of looking into this, but yeah, one of our cave tohu is a Birdman, which we were very lucky to be able to use with our album Bird Like Men, to get permission from the iwi and from the runaka to do that, which was incredible. But it's an image that we've seen throughout the Pacific and throughout kind of nations that link into the Pacific through migration, this idea of this Birdman. And there's other stories as well. There's some within Māori mythology and also in the wider Pacifica mythology of like the egg as a kind of start point. So that was like a clay egg was made, and then that was turned into the first man in some versions of the stories. So it's kind of finding those things and all those things that cross over, to kind of bring together. So it's something that works not just for Kaitahu, but for a lot of people who share that character and that mythology. Yeah, it is an interesting space, and it's something that I think, as you say, like in a Western context, it's often a scary place, a space of endless fear and endless unknowing. But I think within a lot of Māori thinking, we have that ability to remove time from a space, occasionally, and Te Kore is really one of those places. And I remember hearing people talking about just having, like, when you have your eyes closed and you're going into that dream state, those kind of images that come to you that I think are almost like hallucination, like, and show you different pictures and different things. And I think to me that's kind of that Te Kore idea of it's not nothing, it's everything, and just there's so much of it that only the really important things come to the surface, and the kind of calm within that. So I think that a lot of things in the book spur from that place. Well, everything does, so of course the book does. But it was beautiful to be able to write that, and to be able to write just the feeling of black space with one thing in it that you're looking at, and trying to use Te Kore as a sensory tool to bring certain things out for people to see. Yeah, for sure. So there's a sense that there's a character of Te Wai Pounamu within the text, definitely. I'd say that the environment is that extra character. And Pounamu features a lot as like a living being. And we have a lot of our Pounamu like inaka and Totoweka as well. Like they're named after animals, and they're named after fish and things that have living lives. They are alive. And so that features in the book, kind of like pulling that living from the object to show how it is as a life instead of just a stone. And we have lots of stories about our stone being alive, like potini, and I've heard of hine pounamu as well in some stories, as a version of the pounamu narrative. So kind of having that and looking at how we can shape pounamu and how we can have a dialogue with it, was a really important part of the book for me. I feel bad saying this, but Machu the father is a very southern man. Like he's very competent at what he does, and he loves his family. He's not that great with words, but he's a great provider, and he's gonna sort it out. Which I know a lot of southern men and women who are that way. And I think that a beautiful thing about him in this book is he kind of goes through this journey where he realizes that actually his wife Hannah, who is very kind of in the beginning of the book, she's almost a prize. Like, she's a fantastic singer, she's from a good family, she's beautiful. And he realised that she's actually been the leader of the family the whole time. And I think it's beautiful to kind of watch that the roles of support and leadership change within them, which is really neat. And they have twins, and there's this they're very careful around the twins, but they also really love them and they really want to empower them. And it's kind of about seeing how we can know what we want but not know how to get there, and how we work through that with those people that we want to support. So that's a big part of the narrative as well. This is a really interesting question because I haven't written fiction before, and I wouldn't say I'm a fiction writer. I also wouldn't say this is a fiction book. It's a bit poetry, it's a bit fiction, it's a bit non-fiction. It's that kind of like cross-genre, get rid of genre idea. But I think there's a bit of me in all of them, and there's a bit of lots of people I love. Like, Riri Mai is definitely mirrors my partner in a lot of ways, and we've grown up together, been together since we were teenagers, so it kind of is, there's a certain stage of our lives that is represented in that character. Yes, I think I'm kind of in a little bit of all of them. I think that the twins together makes up a lot of who I am. And through this process, I had a kind of image that I'd seen of kind of two koru type looking manaya figures with a pūoro in between. I remember talking to someone down south and being like, oh, this image keeps coming up, and they were like, it's two twins back to back and you're both of them, was kind of the message that came out. And I was like, oh, okay. And I kind of, by looking at those two characters, could see parts of me in both, if that makes sense, or strengths and weaknesses within both. But yeah, I think it's very hard to create a character that doesn't have any of you in it. Yeah. I love verse novels. I love verse novels so much. They're my favourite thing to read. And I think one of the reasons is because it's almost like you can read them reasonably quickly. So you read it in 3.5 hours, which is very fast. But it's kind of like you get to direct a movie in your head after someone's given you the script. So there's a lot that you get the control of. You get the control of the speed. You get to kind of control what people look like, how they sound. But you can process a lot quite quickly. And I really like that about them. I read Anne Kennedy's Sing Song when I was in high school, and I just remember fireworks going off in my brain and kind of realizing how much you could tell in a verse novel and how much value there was in a story told that way. And since then I've gone on to read lots of other ones, like Anne Carson is a big one for me. There's also one called Pakeke by Toi Te Rito, which is absolutely beautiful, about this woman and whales and the relationship between them, which is another Māori verse novel. So yeah, I just think there's a whole lot of advantages to the verse novel. I think that there was definitely kind of an initial phase where I was just like very interested in cave art, but I can't remember a time before I was really. But being more interested to the point where I could see it as a living tradition, and talking about that with whānau and with people like Isaac Tiawa, who was someone who read through the book initially to help me check all the tikanga and all of the information I had within it. But yeah, so there was kind of realizing it was a living practice and learning how to make those forms and how to put modern ideas into those forms and still be able to do it in just as simple a way with one or two lines. And so I think that when that was starting and I was doing that as a living practice, that kind of started to weave in with the ideas I had around character to make the novel. But I think there's kind of that thing when you make visual art a little bit where it's very easy for people to kind of end up making the cover and to kind of end up making the whole world. And always initially I'm like, oh, I wanted someone else to do it, and then I'm actually really happy because I do get the control. And by control I kind of mean more curation of, you know, of the symbols, because there's a lot of symbolism in the book and even on the cover. So yeah, so the cover features kind of cave tohu inspired pieces in kokowai paint, so it was done with the earth paint as well. I think that I have got better at doing that over time. I think realizing that they're not compartmentalized, and that especially in Te Ao Māori, you know, we have mahi toi in general, which is arts, and we kind of didn't really have a lot of kind of breaking that up. It was kind of a thing overall. Yeah, so I think when I realized that, you know, I can say I work in mahi toi, I work in this space, that kind of could pull back those barriers, so I could see that, okay, this poem is done, but it needs to have a picture with it so that it's going to make sense and hold it. I could do that. And yeah, I think a big part of that process for me was making the album Poneke, which was my first album that had pictures and poetry as well, to tell the story of Poneke, of Wellington, and different locations where we recorded things. So that was a really good project that initially was actually just for my learning of how to integrate those things. I ended up putting it out and did fairly well. And yeah, so blending things together by kind of knowing that they're all from the same source. So in the Kaitahu creation story, we have something called Te Waiata Timatanga o Te Ao, or Te Waiata Timataka o Te Ao, which is the world being sung into being that comes from the darkness and from the nothingness. The world is sung into being. And the other iwi don't have the music element of that, the song part. So it's something really special that we have as Kaitahu, is that sense of musicality throughout all creation, which is something that I think of all the time, because I can't help but think about it, because I see it, because it is how we see and view the world, which is a really powerful thing for taonga pūoro practitioners. But I think it gives us within our whakapapa an ability to acknowledge everything as musical. Like a lot of the poems have a musical sound to them. There's kind of repetitive rhythmic elements, and all the words sound good together. And you kind of think about how all those things work through sound, and not just kind of visual and other aspects which are often prioritized. Oh, what a fun! I like this question. Yes, I do think there are strong connections between folklore and present time. I think that pūrākau, those really old stories and points in time where we can all connect back to, or large groups of people connect back to, can be really positive for identity formation. And a lot of the work I've done as a therapist actually has been work around kind of identity formation, and kind of having really strong senses of who we are through story, often, that enable us to kind of keep going, knowing that we have that story to back us up. And I think that's something that especially Pākehā New Zealanders and Tahu New Zealanders can really benefit from, is having those stories that they can use to kind of be in the world as we do as Māori. And yeah, I hope that this book encourages other people to kind of look at those stories and how they might weave in. Very good question. Yeah, so I'm doing a PhD into the use of taonga pūoro within hauora Māori, and that's in public health. Yeah, so my thesis interviews a lot of taonga pūoro practitioners who work in hauora and health, and have done over years. and looks at what they're doing and looks at historically what has been done and how those things stopped happening through things like the Tohunga Suppression Act, and looks at how they've been revived as well. And then I kind of worked making models from people's kōrero, and have taken those into a program down south at my marae of Waitaha, where we've got some amazing taonga pūoro players. And yeah, so it's been a really fulfilling project for sure that's gone on. But yeah, really intense and a lot of pressure as well. But I think that, yeah, taonga pūoro definitely ties into that idea of te waiata tematanga o te ao, and the idea of the environment being, being sounded and being a reciprocal relationship that we have with it that can take place through taonga pūoro. So I feel that, yeah, there's no way to remove it. There's also, if you look on the cover, I can show you, I have one. There's a little putorino and a kōauau and some tumu and a hue, and they also kind of feature in little bits of kōrero and kind of allusions to taonga pūoro throughout the book as well. I'm just going to be nerdy and take out my book because I have a book that will have a list. Ugh. I feel like this is...
I love you, book.
I love a
books
book.
On it as well.
I've had this since I was about 8, and this was I started it when I was 8, and then I didn't have it, so that was my book list for that year, I think. Maybe I was a bit older, and then I've done it every year since. But yeah, there's a lot of ancestors for this book, as Joy Harjo says about books. I do think that a lot of Anne Carson's books have been really influential to this book, because she writes a lot of She writes a lot of verse novels as well. I remember reading a book called Sharp Teeth by Toby Barlow, which I recently reread when I was a teenager, which is about werewolves in LA, that has the same kind of verse format, and that was a really big one for me. Where's some other verse novels that have been great? There's just so many. No, I just can't find them because I can't think. I'm just going to awkwardly wait. No, my brain is turned off now. But I think there's a lot of books that go into this book. That book by Tikau Talks was definitely a big one for the research. Anne Carson for the verse novel aspect. SMA Ranapiri's book kind of came out after I'd written mine, but we kind of were both writing these poetry books that brung atua and ancestors into modern situations, and in a place where both of our books were kind of existing in that same world, and that was really powerful as well. Yeah. Well, I'm handing in my PhD in July, and then I am going to have a long sleep. And I have... What else have I got on? I've actually got a very light workload after that. I've kind of been in a position for a while where I've been in groups that are putting things out, or I've been, in the kind of academic stuff or doing other things. So I think I'm going to have a break. And the next one I do, it's going to be... I know what it's going to be in my head, but I can't figure out the way to do it yet. So I need more time to figure that out. And that might be 5 years. I don't know. So might have to wait.